Ethan Parker woke up that Sunday already feeling a strange pull in the air, like something was waiting to happen, though he could not name what or why, and he tried to shake it off as he brewed coffee in the quiet Oregon morning while his wife Emily hummed softly in the kitchen, unaware that their lives were hours away from shifting forever, and maybe they would have noticed the tension sooner if they had slowed down, but life had been moving so fast for both of them that neither paid attention to small signs, little pauses in conversation, or the way Ethan sometimes drifted off in thought when he believed Emily wasn't looking. They had been married for 8 years, solid years, steady years, years filled with love but also with the fatigue of grown-up responsibilities, and lately Ethan felt a distance between them that he couldn't fully explain, though he blamed work stress, long hours, missed dinners, and the heavy pressure that came with wanting to be a good provider, a good husband, a good man. By late afternoon, Emily began preparing for dinner with her younger sister Lily, who had always been a bright spark, funny, quick, unfiltered, but also a person who sometimes said things she shouldn't, not maliciously, just impulsively, like her mind never stopped running ahead of her mouth. She and Emily had always been close, so when Emily announced that Lily was coming for dinner to cheer everyone up, Ethan smiled and agreed, though something inside him tightened for reasons he didn't fully understand. Lily arrived with an energy that felt bigger than the small living room, stepping inside with a blast of cold Oregon evening air as she shook off her coat and greeted them with her usual dramatic flair. Though Ethan noticed her smile seemed slightly strained, her laugh a little too high, and her eyes carried something he couldn't read, something that made him nervous without knowing why. The three of them sat down to eat, and normally dinner with Lily was loud and full of teasing jokes, but that night everything felt off, as though each word floated in the air waiting for judgment, and Lily kept glancing between Ethan and Emily like she was checking their reactions to things that weren't even being said. Ethan tried to ignore it, focusing on the meal, the conversation, the comfortable normalcy he desperately wanted to preserve, but his mind wouldn't quiet, and he kept feeling watched or maybe studied and he couldn't understand it. Emily, always the peacemaker, tried to lift the mood by talking about weekend plans, work events, and little stories meant to make everyone laugh. But even she seemed puzzled by her sister's odd behavior. Lily tapped her fingers nervously along the table, sipped her wine too quickly, and kept adjusting her hair though it didn't need adjusting, and Ethan wondered if she was going through something personal that she didn't want to share. It happened so fast that Ethan couldn't pinpoint the moment when the evening shifted from uncomfortable to catastrophic, but after a small silence, one of those pauses that suddenly becomes too quiet, Lily leaned back in her chair, lifted her glass with a half-smile and said in a playful, almost careless voice, "Well, Emily, looks like your husband prefers brunettes these days," and she laughed as if she had made a harmless joke, but the words pierced the room like a sharp crack in glass, freezing Ethan in place. Emily blinked, confused, letting out a light laugh because she assumed her sister was joking, but Ethan felt the air collapse around him, his heart racing with a sudden shock so intense he had trouble breathing, because that remark, those few words, held too much truth that Lily should not know, truth he never wanted Emily to hear from anyone, least of all her own sister. He stared at Lily, trying to keep his face neutral, but inside panic thundered through every part of him, and Lily's eyes widened slightly like she realized too late the weight of what she had said. Ethan could see the regret rising quickly in her expression, but the damage was already done, and a strange silence spread across the table, deep and suffocating, louder than any argument. Emily laughed again, trying to brush it off, but her voice carried a soft edge of confusion, a small crease forming between her brows as she looked between them, waiting for someone to explain the joke she didn't understand. Ethan forced a smile, fighting the instinct to get up and walk out of the room, but his throat felt too tight to speak and he knew that if he opened his mouth, everything might come unraveling too soon, too fast. Lily's eyes dropped to her plate, her fingers trembling around her wine glass, and she whispered something about it just being a joke, but the words came out thin and weak, stripped of her usual confidence, revealing that it had not been a joke at all, not really, and Ethan knew instantly that she knew something she should never have known. His mind raced, trying to understand how she could possibly be aware of anything connected to the mistake he had made months ago. A mistake he had spent every day regretting, wishing he could undo. A mistake he thought was buried, sealed off, locked away forever. Dinner crawled forward painfully, each moment feeling stretched and unnatural, and Emily, though trying to keep conversation alive, grew quieter as she sensed something wrong. Ethan answered questions with short responses, barely tasting the food in front of him, while Lily avoided meeting anyone's eyes, her normal charm gone, replaced with nervous glances and deepening guilt that seemed to fill the room. Ethan watched her closely, every movement, every twitch of her face, searching for clues. Did she know everything or only pieces? Or was this just suspicion mixed with a careless comment? Or had someone told her something? Or had she overheard something at work without meaning to? His heart pounded with every possibility, each one worse than the last. Lily worked in the same company as the woman he should never have been involved with, and the realization hit him hard, slicing through his thoughts like lightning. Someone at work must have said something, maybe joking, maybe gossiping, never imagining it would reach someone connected to him. But gossip had a way of traveling, quietly, subtly, dangerously. When dinner finally ended, Ethan felt exhausted as though he had run miles through mud, his nerves raw and buzzing. Emily went to the kitchen to wrap leftovers, humming softly out of habit, but her tone carried questions she hadn't voiced yet. Lily helped gather dishes, but her hands shook enough that she dropped a fork, flinching when it hit the floor, and Ethan saw her eyes fill with panic for a brief moment before she quickly looked away. When Emily stepped into the pantry, Lily glanced at Ethan with a tight, pained expression, one filled with apology, fear, and something else he couldn't read. "I didn't mean it like that," she whispered, voice trembling. "I didn't think." But before Ethan could respond, Emily returned and Lily snapped back into an awkward smile. When Lily finally left, the front door closing behind her with a soft thud that seemed to echo, Ethan stood in the living room feeling the weight of the entire evening pressing down on his chest. Emily walked over and wrapped her arms around him gently, assuming he was just tired, unaware of the storm churning inside him. That simple gesture of trust nearly broke him right there, because he knew that trust was hanging by a thin thread, and he feared it would snap the moment she learned what her sister had hinted at. Later that night, long after Emily had fallen asleep beside him, Ethan lay awake staring at the ceiling as the words replayed in his mind. "Looks like your husband prefers brunettes these days," and he felt the sting of truth buried inside that remark. Lily knew something. And if Lily knew, Emily would soon know too. He could feel the countdown beginning, the fragile balance of his life tilting toward a truth he could no longer hide, no matter how desperately he wished he could. The night felt heavy, thick with dread, and as he listened to Emily's steady breathing beside him, Ethan realized the remark had done more than frighten him. It had opened a crack in the world he had built, a crack that would not close, a crack that would widen until the truth poured through. And all he could do was lie there, waiting for everything to change. Ethan woke the next morning with a knot in his chest, the kind that sits heavy and refuses to loosen, and he knew the remark Lily had thrown into the air would not disappear, because words like that do not fade, they grow, echo, chase you until you finally face them, and he felt that truth pressing against his ribs as he drove to work through a gray Oregon drizzle that soaked the windshield and blurred the road. He kept replaying the dinner, replaying Lily's trembling hands, her panicked eyes, the way her voice had cracked after she realized what she had revealed, and every detail made him more certain she knew something real, something too close to the secret he had worked so hard to bury. At his office he moved through the morning like a shadow, answering emails, nodding through meetings, pretending everything was normal while inside he felt the world tilting off balance. He kept thinking about the woman he had been involved with months ago, Claire, a coworker he should never have gotten close to, someone who had come into his life during a time when he and Emily were drifting apart emotionally, both tired, both overwhelmed, both surviving instead of connecting. He had ended things with Claire quickly, realizing he was crossing a line he could never fully return from, and though she accepted it with a sad understanding, the consequences remained buried like a landmine waiting for pressure. By lunchtime, his anxiety had climbed so high he couldn't eat, and he finally stepped outside into the cold air, breathing in sharp gulps to steady his nerves, because he needed answers. He couldn't just sit and wait for disaster to unfold. He pulled out his phone and texted Lily, asking if they could talk, and she responded almost immediately with a simple yes, which told him she was just as uneasy as he was. They agreed to meet at a small cafe near the waterfront, a quiet place with warm lighting and old wooden tables, the kind of spot where people went to have conversations they didn't want others to overhear. When Ethan arrived, Lily was already there, sitting by the window with her shoulders hunched and her fingers tapping anxiously against a mug she hadn't touched. As he walked toward her, she looked up with eyes full of apology and fear, and the first thing she said when he sat down was, "I messed up, Ethan," her voice low and shaky, and he could tell she had been thinking about that remark nonstop too. He asked how she knew, his voice barely steady, and she swallowed hard before explaining that she had overheard people talking at the company where she worked. Casual gossip, careless whispers, two co-workers mentioning Ethan's name and Claire's name in the same breath, laughing like it was an office rumor rather than a real wound waiting to open. Lily hadn't believed it at first, didn't want to, but then she noticed Ethan acting distant these past months, noticed the way Emily kept trying to fix cracks in their marriage without knowing where they came from, and the pieces had started falling into place in her mind until the picture was too sharp to ignore. Lily's voice trembled as she said she never meant to expose anything during dinner, that the wine mixed with guilt and confusion had made her say something reckless, but she didn't know how to take it back once it slipped out, and she had been terrified the moment the words left her mouth. Ethan listened in silence, feeling shame settle heavily across his shoulders, because Lily shouldn't have been pulled into this, she shouldn't have known anything, she shouldn't be carrying the burden of a secret that wasn't hers. Lily leaned forward, eyes shining with regret, and whispered that she didn't want to be part of a lie, not between her sister and the man her sister loved, and that she couldn't hold the information much longer because every time she looked at Emily, she felt sick with guilt. Ethan's heart clenched painfully as she spoke, because he understood her torn loyalty, understood the heavy weight of honesty, even though he desperately wished she had never found out anything at all. He wanted to protect Emily from that pain, wanted to protect their marriage while they were rebuilding slowly, quietly, carefully, and now he felt everything slipping like sand through his fingers. He told Lily he needed time to figure out how to talk to Emily, how to tell her gently, respectfully, without shattering her sense of security, and Lily nodded but said in a soft, trembling voice that time was running out, that secrets always came to light, and that Emily deserved the truth from him, not from someone else, especially not from her own sister. The conversation left Ethan heavy with dread as he walked out of the cafe, the sky darkening with rain clouds that seemed to echo the storm inside his head, and he stood by the waterfront for a long moment, staring at the waves hitting the rocks as wind whipped along the shoreline. He thought about Emily's laughter, her gentle nature, the way she always put others first, and guilt twisted deep in his gut as he imagined the look on her face when she learned what he had done. He had convinced himself the affair was a mistake he could bury, that ending it quickly meant it was over, that he could repair his marriage without peeling open old wounds, but now he saw how fragile that illusion had always been, how truth had been waiting, crawling quietly toward the surface. He drove home slowly after work, his hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly, his chest tight with fear and regret. When he walked inside, Emily greeted him with a warm smile, asking if he wanted dinner, and the kindness in her voice hit him like a punch, because he felt unworthy of the softness she offered so freely. He spent the evening pretending everything was normal, though his mind spun relentlessly, replaying Lily's words over and over. Emily talked about her day, about a coworker who brought cupcakes, about a podcast she listened to on the drive home, and Ethan nodded, offering small replies, terrified she would sense something in his voice, some tremor of truth. But Emily, trusting and unaware, kissed his cheek after dinner and thanked him for helping with the dishes, and that simple gesture made him want to break down right there, confess everything, beg for forgiveness, but the words caught in his throat as fear held him silent. Later, when Emily went upstairs to fold laundry, Ethan stepped outside onto the back porch, breathing in the cold night air as his thoughts swirled in endless circles. He checked his phone compulsively, expecting Lily to text again, expecting something to crack open any minute, but the screen stayed still. The next day, Lily showed up at their house unexpectedly, her eyes red and her expression stressed, and Ethan knew instantly she had reached her breaking point. Emily welcomed her warmly, unaware of the tension between them, but Lily looked at Ethan with a deep sorrow that made his stomach twist. She pulled him aside for a moment in the hallway and whispered that she couldn't keep pretending, that the guilt was too heavy, that she almost told Emily the truth that morning because she couldn't stand lying to her sister anymore. Ethan felt panic rise in him, but before he could respond, Emily approached, asking if everything was okay with a sweet, curious smile. Lily froze, eyes filling with tears, and murmured something about being emotional over work stress, quickly stepping outside to get some air. Ethan followed, heart racing, and found Lily leaning against the porch railing, wiping her eyes as she admitted that she didn't want to be the one to break Emily, but she couldn't lie anymore either. Ethan begged her for a little more time, promising he would tell Emily himself, promising he wouldn't run from responsibility, promising he would not let Emily hear the truth in a way that felt cruel or sudden. And Lily looked at him with trembling uncertainty before nodding slowly, though he could see she didn't believe time would help much. When she drove away, Ethan felt the walls of his life closing in, each hour heavier than the one before. That evening, as he sat on the couch beside Emily watching a movie she loved, he barely heard a single word, his mind consumed by the truth he knew he needed to speak. Emily leaned against his shoulder, trusting, relaxed, completely unaware of the storm her sister and husband were quietly trying to contain, and Ethan felt a sharp ache in his chest because he knew that peace would not last. Not anymore. Everything was moving toward an unavoidable moment, a moment he could feel approaching like thunder rolling in the distance, slow but certain, and he realized that part of him was terrified, but another part, the part that loved Emily deeply, knew that honesty, even painful honesty, was the only chance they had left. And as the night settled over their home, Ethan understood that nothing could stop the unraveling now. Not silence, not fear, not hope. The truth was coming, and he had to face it. That night, when Ethan walked through the front door and saw the living room lit only by a small lamp, he knew instantly that everything he had been trying to delay had finally arrived, because Emily was sitting on the couch with her shoulders tight, her hands clasped, and her eyes locked onto his phone lying on the coffee table as if it were a piece of evidence she couldn't understand yet, and the look on her face sent a cold wave through him so strong he almost stumbled. She didn't yell his name, didn't ask why he was late, didn't stand to greet him. She simply stared at him with eyes that looked dazed, wounded, and strangely calm, and that calmness terrified him more than anger ever could. When she spoke, her voice was soft and trembling. "Ethan, why was Lily crying in the driveway?" And before he could answer, she added in a whisper that cut straight through him, "And why did she tell me to ask you about brunettes?" And those words made his stomach drop so fast he felt like the floor had disappeared from under him. He couldn't breathe for a moment, couldn't form a lie, couldn't reach for an excuse, because he saw something in Emily's face that told him she already sensed the truth, even if she didn't know the details yet. He sat down slowly, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on his chest like a heavy stone, and the air felt thick, hard to swallow, as if the whole room was holding its breath. Emily's hand shook as she lifted his phone, her voice breaking as she said she had gone to check something harmless, just a grocery list, but she had found old deleted messages tucked away in a hidden folder he didn't even know still existed, fragments of conversations that didn't spell everything out but were enough to show there had been someone else, and the pain in her eyes was deeper than anything he had ever seen. Ethan felt everything inside him collapse, guilt crashing through him in waves, because he knew he couldn't hide anymore. Not when the truth was sitting there in her hands, not when Lily had already broken under the weight of it, not when Emily's heart was cracking right in front of him. So he began to speak, slowly, quietly, his voice shaking as he told her he had made a mistake months ago. A terrible mistake during a time when he felt lost and disconnected, and he explained that it didn't last long, that he ended it, that he regretted it every single day, that he never wanted to hurt her, never wanted to risk their marriage, never wanted this moment to exist, but now here it was. Emily didn't interrupt him, didn't shout or throw anything. She just listened, her face pale, her body still, her breathing uneven as tears slid down her cheeks with a silent pain that was far worse than an outburst. When he finished, she stood up slowly as if her body was made of fragile glass, taking a step backward as though she needed distance to survive the moment, and she whispered, "I trusted you." The words breaking in the middle, then added, "I thought we were fixing things," and her voice cracked in a way that pierced him so deeply he felt physically weak. He reached toward her, but she stepped away, holding up a trembling hand, not in anger but in exhaustion, heartbreak, and a need to protect herself from more hurt. She asked him why he didn't tell her sooner, why he pretended everything was fine, why he let her believe they were rebuilding their marriage without telling her what they were rebuilding from, and Ethan had no answer that felt worthy, nothing that could undo the damage or make her feel safe again. He told her he was scared, ashamed, terrified of losing her, terrified of facing the consequences, and she closed her eyes with a painful sadness because fear didn't erase betrayal. She told him she needed time, needed space, needed to think without him standing in front of her with apologies he should have made months ago. And he nodded, knowing she was right, knowing she deserved whatever time she asked for, whatever distance she needed to breathe again. She went upstairs without slamming the door, without another word, moving with a quiet determination that tore at him even more than anger would have. because it showed how deeply he had wounded her trust. Alone in the living room, Ethan felt the weight of his choices settle over him like a suffocating blanket, and he sat there for a long time, staring at the staircase, listening to the muffled sounds of Emily moving in the bedroom, each sound a reminder of the walls now between them. The silence felt unbearable, filled with the echo of everything he had lost and everything he had taken for granted, and he realized that loving someone wasn't enough if you didn't protect that love when it mattered most. Outside, he noticed headlights lingering in the driveway, and when he stepped out into the cool night air, he found Lily sitting in her car, face hidden in her hands, shoulders shaking with guilt and regret. When she looked up and saw him, her expression twisted with pain, because she hadn't meant to break her sister's heart, but she also couldn't carry the secret anymore. She apologized over and over, her voice thick with tears, saying she felt trapped between loyalty to her sister and compassion for him, saying she didn't know how to handle something so heavy. Ethan told her it wasn't her fault, that the blame was entirely his, that she shouldn't carry guilt for something he did, and she nodded, though the tears kept falling because the damage was done and she felt like she had played a part in it. She asked if Emily hated her now, and Ethan shook his head, telling her Emily wasn't angry with her, just hurt by him, hurt by the truth, hurt by everything she never saw coming. Lily wiped her face, whispered that she wanted Emily to heal no matter what happened next, and drove away slowly, leaving Ethan alone again with the weight of the night. When he went back inside, the house felt different. Empty, fragile, echoing with silence that seemed to reach every corner. He walked through the room slowly, touching the back of the couch, the dining table, the picture frames on the wall, the small things that made up the life he had shared with Emily, and each touch felt like a reminder of what he had put at risk. He sat on the edge of the couch, staring up at the ceiling, and for the first time in months he allowed himself to feel the full gravity of what he had done. Not just regret, but deep grief for the pain he caused the woman he loved most. Upstairs, Emily sat on the floor beside the bed, hugging her knees, trying to breathe through the weight in her chest. She felt torn between anger and sorrow, between love and betrayal, between wanting to scream and wanting to disappear under the covers. She thought about the memories she had with Ethan, the road trips, the early morning coffee talks, the laughter they shared, and the painful realization that those memories now felt tangled with doubt. She wondered if she could ever trust him again, wondered if love was enough, wondered if forgiveness was possible, or if the crack in their marriage was too deep to mend. But she also remembered the man she knew Ethan to be. The man who cared for her, supported her, protected her when life felt overwhelming, and those memories made her heart ache even more, because love didn't vanish overnight, even when trust did. As hours passed, Ethan stayed downstairs, giving her space, waiting for any sign that she wanted to talk again. Though he knew she needed time, maybe days, maybe weeks, maybe longer. And yet, even in the uncertainty, he felt a faint spark of hope, painful but real, because Emily hadn't told him to leave, hadn't said she was done, hadn't closed the door completely. Instead, she asked for time, which meant there was still a chance for healing, even if the path ahead would be long and filled with difficult conversations. When Emily finally came downstairs in the early hours of the morning, her eyes tired from crying, she didn't sit beside him, but she did sit in the same room, and that small, quiet gesture felt like a fragile thread pulling them towards something like hope. She told him softly that she didn't know what their future looked like, didn't know how long healing would take, didn't know if trust could ever fully return, but she wanted honesty moving forward. No more secrets, no more fear, no more hiding. Ethan agreed, promising with a trembling voice that he would be completely open from now on, that he would do whatever it took to rebuild the trust he had broken. Emily didn't respond with warmth, not yet, but she nodded faintly, a small sign that she wasn't giving up completely. They sat in silence as dawn slowly lit the sky outside, the quiet heavy but no longer hopeless, and Ethan realized that this moment, painful, raw, delicate, was the beginning of a long journey toward healing. The night had torn open wounds neither of them expected, but as morning touched the edges of their living room, Ethan felt something gentle stirring between them, something uncertain but real, something like the faint beginnings of forgiveness. He didn't know where their story would go, but he knew he loved her truly, deeply, and he was ready to fight for their marriage with every part of himself. And Emily, though broken-hearted, felt a small spark of warmth deep inside, a reminder that love could survive storms. Not untouched, not unchanged, but still alive, still fighting, still reaching for a future where trust might one day return.